Hi guys. Before we proceed to this video, we've got something very important to share with you. Neoliberalism, Inequality and Authoritarianism by Professor Jon V. Kofas is available for purchase. You can order it directly from the publisher Little French eBooks or through Amazon.
Hello everyone, welcome. This is a session on the issue of institutional crisis in the United States and the loss of confidence in the legitimacy of the institutional structures, both public and private. This has manifested itself in many domains. However, I have decided to choose three specific areas. The first is the recent election of a self-proclaimed Muslim democratic socialist for mayor in New York City, which was a huge surprise, not just for the Democratic Party, for the Republicans, for New York City, but for the entire country, because the mainstream media had written this individual off, who basically appealed to the people of New York about the institutional crisis manifesting itself in the cost of living, one of the highest in New York City, and a city, by the way, which has more than twice the poverty level of other United States cities, major cities. The institutional crisis, the second part I should point out, the second part of this has to do with the Department of Justice and the judiciary, the judicial branch, the courts, all the way up to the Supreme Court, from the federal courts to the Supreme Court, and the fact that the judicial branch has been under President Trump from the first term to his second term today, has been aiding in the pursuit of this administration of unitary executive theory, that is to strengthen the federal government at the expense of the legislative branch, while even the judiciary has been weakened, again, with the considerable support of the Department of Justice, which has used its offices to essentially eliminate any perceived political opponents and enemies within the law, of course. And the third part has to do with U.S. foreign policy, where there we see the institutional crisis is one of where the United States, and I've talked about this in previous sessions, the United States essentially has used geopolitical leverage on a world scale, considering it has the largest military in the world, and it has consistently used that leverage for geoeconomic advantage, except that in the second Trump administration, in the last 6 months, the added element, the two added elements are the combination of militarism as well as economic nationalism, a tariff war, and then military adventures, as we saw in June 2025, a war that Israel started against Iran, and the United States joined in with bombings of Iran's sites where potentially it would use to develop nuclear warheads. The question of legitimacy of the institutional structure in the United States, both public and private, has to do with at least the majority of the population, the citizenry, accepting the legitimacy of those institutions insofar as they are representing the social contract insofar as they are within the confines of the Constitution, and insofar as those institutions, both the public sector and private sector institutions, serve the entire population and not merely the richest of the population of the citizens in the United States. What we have seen in the United States is increasingly a climate of social polarization, political polarization, and this, of course, this is why I start with the Mamdani election in New York for the New York mayor's office, and we saw that there as well. We have seen that there is a universal recognition that the political arena, both the Democratic Party, the establishment Democratic Party, pro Wall Street, pro Cold War, pro militarism, pro military industrial complex Democratic Party, as it has proved itself over the decades, as well as the Republican Party, which is not that different except on cultural issues and identity politics issues. Both of these political parties represent the exact same elites. This was manifested very clearly during the campaign for the mayoral election in New York City, but even especially after the young man, 33-year-old man, who happens to be Muslim, by the way, of Indian background, won the primary and will most likely be the mayor of New York. And then we see the convergence of the two main political parties, the establishment Democratic, the old Democratic Party, as some like to call it. In other words, the Cold War, pro-Wall Street Democratic Party, basically making some of the same arguments as the Republicans. So what we see is what some scholars call the uniparty convergence. In other words, really there is only one political party insofar as it represents the elites. The crisis comes in, as we will see in the first part of this three-part session on the mayor's election, Mamdani's election. The crisis comes in insofar as the elites recognize that the population, at least a large majority of the population, because when you combine the vote that Mamdani received, and when you look at the vote that progressives on that in the primary also received, versus what Andrew Cuomo, the establishment, pro-establishment Democratic, pro-establishment Republican candidate received, you can see that there is a recognition on the part of the elites that there is a crisis insofar as they have lost control of the masses. The main issue in the institutional legitimacy component of all this is that the elites maintain control of the masses. And in the United States, they seem to have lost that because the living standards of roughly 2/3 of the population of the United States are so bad that they live paycheck to paycheck. In fact, roughly 78%, according to one public opinion poll, live paycheck to paycheck. The poverty level in the United States is 11 to 12%. In New York, it's 25%. So we have the realization on everyone's part. People know this. The elites know this better than anyone. They have access to the data, and they know they're losing control of the public, and they have disdain for democracy. They don't want popular democracy for a very simple reason, by the way. Popular democracy means they will lose their privileged status in society. They will lose the power at all levels in both the private institutional, public institutional level, and that is what frightens them. I invite you to join me for these three parts of the institutional crisis and the decadence of the elites, which is, to me as a historian, is reminiscent of what took place during the decline and fall of Rome, when the Roman elites were scared of the plebeians, the senatorial class, the Roman nobility feared that it was losing its grip on the population as the economy was declining in the western part of the Roman Empire. The eastern part, of course, that eventually became known as the Byzantine Empire, survived for another roughly 1,000 years. But this is somewhat comparable, the decline of institutional legitimacy, which is caused by the elites, as was in the case of the Roman Empire, while the elites, of course, will never accept responsibility, but instead blame anyone and everyone other than looking inwards and doing some self-reflection. I thank you for joining. I look forward to your questions, comments, and to please join this academic and educational channel. Thank you very much.